Hello everybody, we're here once again on our Tuesday sessions, and today we have with us Mr. Tim Rogers, who is going to talk with us about the art of negotiating. And before he gets started, before anybody says anything, let me make a point. You only advise your clients, you do not make decisions for your clients. The clients are the ones who decide what they're going to offer or how they're going to do it. But a lot of times clients do ask you for advice. And that's what Tim is going to help us with. How do you give that advice? And you want to start, or you want somebody to ask you a question?
Either way, I think when it comes to negotiation, the agency disclosure form says right on it that when it goes through the duties that clients get with client level service, below the fiduciary duties, it says and assistance and advice, counsel, and negotiation. And so I think it's very important to help clients, to help sellers, to help buyers, to help renters, to help landlords in that regards. But again, to Liz's point, at the end of the day, they make the decision. We can stand on the table and jump up and down and tell them that what they're deciding to do probably isn't going to fly, but if that's what they want to try to do, they want to try to do it. So I think, where a lot of our role comes in is usually interacting with another agent or brokerage or firm or colleague. But sometimes if you're dealing directly with the buyer and seller or the landlord and tenant, you're just sitting there trying to get them to hold hands and play nice. So there's a lot of assistance in the negotiation, and then exercising reasonable care and skill, which is another thing referenced in that form that I like reading. It is your experience and know-how in how to get through that negotiating stalemate that can turn up sometimes. So that's really what I had to say to start with.
So you write up an offer and you submit it, and they come back with a verbal. Yeah, he really wants full price, list price.
Good for him. If you're writing up an offer, if you know the agent and you've dealt with them for a long time, or you know the person that's giving you the reply, it's a person, you're dealing directly with the seller. Again, what you want to get is you took the time to write them an offer. It'd be nice for them to give you a written reply. That's your best choice. The second best thing that does work, especially in today's age, because everybody is so busy, I don't know how they have time to get out of bed in the morning. They're so busy. It's just covered up. But have them get their client to take time to send them an email that says, we want to counter at full price, we're okay with your other conditions. And have them forward that to you, so you at least have something to send to your buyer saying, look, here's their reply. It's electronic communication. It shows their intent. Is it a contract? No, but it shows you something. I don't really like taking a verbal to anybody.
It really means nothing in South Carolina.
What about a home warranty? Do you suggest that they ask for it if they have a buyer? Do you say that they ask for that up front, whether they are thinking they want one or thinking they don't?
Well, I think it's always a good idea to get a home warranty on a house. It helps you in E&O cases. It helps with your deductible. It's always good to ask. It's always good to put one on there and talk to your client about the benefits of a home warranty. They may again choose to say, had one 5 years ago when I lived in Topeka. Hated it. It was terrible. But by and large, it's good to put it on there, and then, sure, that's part of the negotiation. Who's paying for it?
Exactly. As part of using it as part of a negotiation tactic.
Right. It comes down to dollars. So you're looking at, you want to get the seller, if the seller's smart, is looking at their net dollars. When you're asking for closing costs, you're asking for home warranties, you're asking for this, that, and the other, paying for this service and that inspection, that affects their net. So that affects their mountaintop they're standing on. So I think it's a great thing to get home warranties.
about like lowball offers, or how close, what's the best thing to do to get close to each other?
Well, you don't wanna, if you have I have a bank I do some work for, and everybody, because of the world of mis and disinformation, there's people that bring incredibly low offers to me for this bank that I do some work for. In any bank, I've gotten incredibly low offers, because there's late night infomercials, I guess, talking about just how to steal bank-owned properties, right? Great, good for them. So if you get you need to prepare your seller up front when you take the listing. Here's the things I can control. Okay, I will only ask you to respond to a written offer that has the funds sourced and or how they're getting financed. And I'll give you my opinion of that financing letter, my experienced opinion, and the conditions that they want and they're asking for, you know, the contingencies. I'll help you control those things, and we'll make sure that they're willing to give us reasonable earnest money in a reasonable time from when it's ratified. But what I can't promise you is what the number's gonna be. So you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, if I do those things for you, you have to promise to me that even if you hate the number, you'll reply to it, even if you're replying back with your list price, and here's the reasons why, or you're just coming a little bit, tiny bit off your list price in lieu of rejecting it. Because when you reject it, people just shut down. So that's how you deal with a lowball offer.
Let me ask, if you have a situation where there's a house for sale, it's listed with another company, say it's listed for
Shame on that.
$225,000, I agree with you. $225,000, but everything in the neighborhood sells for $50,000 to $70,000. But my buyer really, really wants this house. And how do I advise that buyer to make an offer? Loaded question, right?
So is the house 5 times the size and quality of the other houses in the neighborhood?
It's quality, yes, but not size.
Bigger?
It's new construction and everything else is older.
Everything else is older, so it's
From the
gonna sell
50s.
for more.
It's what?
From the 50s.
Everything else is.
But
ridiculous.
but then there's a new apple on the street, and all the old cores are sitting around it, right? When you have to kind of take into consideration that that's a newer home, and an appraiser's going to have to draw his comps from nearby areas, or her comps from nearby areas, not from those older houses. So you have to kind of do a little more research there to find a real comp for that. And yeah, there's going to be a negative associated with the fact that there's nothing in that neighborhood pulling that to that price. And you need to ask that listing agent, how did you arrive at this price? You obviously see the neighborhood around you. And if they say something crazy like, well, you know, 10 miles over, there's a brand new neighborhood and this is 20 grand less than what they're selling. Well, then you say, look, genius, that's a brand new neighborhood. This isn't a brand new neighborhood. Okay, where did you, give me a thoughtful reply, because I'm trying to bring you an offer, because you put your sign in the yard and signed up some well-intentioned seller telling them you could get them somewhere near this number. What were you thinking, or did you choose to think that day?
That's a lot of stuff that's verbal. You do a lot of verbal
You
negotiating.
have to do that. You have to, I like to ask a lot of questions, a lot of very dumb questions.
Of the
Just-
listing agent.
Of anybody, you know, just to help me understand where they're coming from and where they're at. Because the more you get people telling you what they think and where they're coming from and why they're doing what they're doing, or why they've done what they've done, then somewhere in that you're going to get from them some things that you can use to help justify your position and where you're going at. Because the idea is to get everybody together, right?
That's
And-
the ultimate goal, is to
Right.
come together.
Right, so the fact that you don't, it just looks weird to you, doesn't make sense, you've kind of got to ask them a bunch of questions to figure out how they got there, and then do some research to maybe help them understand why where they arrived could potentially be flawed, right?
But if your buyer really wanted this new house in this neighborhood, would you encourage them or discourage them from buying it?
I would ask them why they just have to have this house that's so much more house than any other house in the neighborhood.
Location,
I mean,
not
Location.
area, location.
in the neighborhood or the school district or the,
Downtown,
it's down, oh, so you're down in an area where,
Location toward
all
downtown.
toward downtown, it's not.
right, I think that if it's what they want, it's our job to get it for them. And I think that there's plenty of things that you should be able to show them anywhere that from a price standpoint, more easily show value, okay? And if they really want to come back because they like that, you've got to find a way to help them get that at the best possible price. And if they're getting it financed, you've got to help figure out why your price has a chance to get appraised. Otherwise, you're leading them into something where they're just going to spend money on a home inspection on something that's not going to appraise. And then if it doesn't appraise up front, you need to have that conversation with the seller and the listing agent and ask them repeatedly. You know, we're concerned about the appraisal. Are you prepared to work with us if the appraisal doesn't come in? And they're never going to commit, but if the more you ask it, you're going to get them to soften their response somewhat. So, but at the end, I would really try to get that buyer to ask them why they want to make it so difficult, you know? Because they're always you never want to have the most expensive, biggest house in a particular neighborhood. If you're making your business decision, that's not the one you want. You want to have the runt little house on the cutest lot. You know
It's a
that,
young kid.
right? So,
Anybody else have a question?
Tim,
Teresa?
a little bit further on that, can you speak to us of a scenario about when the appraisal doesn't come in, which happened to me on my listing? We did get the deal to go through, but it did involve a lot of negotiating. The seller was, of course, the most unhappy with the situation and the outcome, but.
and it was your listing? Did you feel like it was going to have trouble appraising at the contract price?
No, it did not.
Mm-hmm.
It was the VA appraisal,
Mhm.
and Stan represented the buyer, and we did get it worked out. And my seller was already under contract for
To
their
do
next,
something else.
for their next home.
Right.
So it was almost, you know, and I'm still new
Right.
here in this area, selling real estate. So I felt a little bit like I let my people down, because we did go back and we had to revisit that original price. But Susan Bryant helped me with that, and one thing she said was, you have to look at your buyers were prepared to pay this amount. They were going to pay that, so they obviously thought the house was worth it.
Right.
But of course, then it didn't appraise. So could you speak to that? I mean, if you
Well, I
probably
mean, you're
had
right,
that
that's
happen
very
in
good
this.
advice. Sure, I've had that happen recently, and I'm having it happen in a different way right now that I'm not sure what the ramifications are yet, but that's a very good point. That buyer thought it was a reasonable price, or they wouldn't have gone to contract at that number.
Right.
I think sometimes the appraiser maybe needs to explain themselves how they came in wrong. I had one on a pretty good sized commercial building that they were way off the mark. They weren't taking a comp right next to the property that had just sold, and they wouldn't use it. So, it's all about preparing your people. When you have a contract subject to appraisal, okay, subject to inspection, subject to financing, and when it's a VA appraisal, VA loan, by definition, you know that it's probably 100% loan, and usually they're asking your seller for some closing costs.
That's right.
So that's really reducing your seller's net and artificially increasing the sale price. Of course the buyer's for it, they're not coming out of pocket. Right? So one of the things you do with the seller up front is you prepare them, you say, look, here's the pros of this offer, and here's the cons of this offer. Okay, they're offering us $200,000, but they want $8,000 in closing costs, so it's really $192,000. But the appraisal's going to have to come in at $200,000, and we're going to deal with a governmental appraisal. It could be just the same appraiser we'd have anywhere else, but that particular appraiser is approved or licensed or certified by the VA to fill out their forms, and their forms are different than an FHA or a conventional or a USDA or whatever kind of loan. So I try to do that. I try to look at all of it when you're negotiating as many conditions as you can think of. If you can get your client to listen, and you can think of them, because we forget things all the time because we're human. But try to think about what the potential pitfall is along with the pluses of it. And then when it happens, they're not as shocked, they're not as standoffish, that you don't feel maybe like you let them down because you didn't really, but it just turned out that way.
Right.
And
So I think the point what I hear you saying is, when you present the offer on the house, it's the time that you prepare your sellers for what
Right.
might happen.
Here's what they're offering, and here's the conditions they have, and you've already checked with that buyer's agent that, yes, a VA loan is the only way these folks can go, and yes, they have to have the closing costs or they can't make this dog hunt, right? So therefore, you know that you're artificially increasing the price of the house to pay for their closing costs, and probably their home warranty, and by the way, anything that's found not so, on the home inspection that's a remedy item, but the VA appraiser can find things that need to be cleaned up, fixed up, tightened up, and the buyer can't do any of that, or it dings a VA loan. So you have to prepare the seller for that. If they want to go forward, then a lot of times they go through and there's not an issue. A lot of times they go through and they're a disaster, and they're all over the map.
But on the buyer's side too, you're speaking about the seller's side, but on the buyer's side, wouldn't you need to, buyers may not even realize that they're taking that money out of the seller's pocket, unlike a first-time home buyer. So when they write that contract, you have to say, yes, you may be paying full price with this
Right,
offer, but it's
Right.
not really going to be that to these
Right,
people.
if you're
Just
the bu-
understand that.
If
going
you're
in.
the buyer's agent, you really got to explain that to them when they all want to talk about closing. Because again, these late night infomercials that tell everybody how to buy stuff for nothing. You ask the seller for closing costs. Well, all that's doing is reducing the seller's net in their pocket. The seller's looking for what they can put in their pocket at the end of the day. And so, yeah, if you've got the buyer, you need to coach them on, yeah, asking for this is wonderful, great, super, but this is what the seller hears. Right, and when you have an agent on the other side that's presenting it to you, and they say they're really offering you $200, but they want $8,000 in closing costs, you've got to get back to that agent in writing saying what we're hearing is $192. So that there's a chance that agent gets to their seller, or their buyer, excuse me. There's a chance that agent gets to their buyer and says, "Look, what the seller's really hearing is $192," and then you can try to keep working together. Because that's really the objective, to get everybody to understand what's really being presented and not push things that are pretend.
And not only the buyer and the seller, but like you just mentioned, the other real estate agent that you're working with.
Right.
You may have to be able to educate them about
And-
what is really going where.
More often than not.
Yeah,
Right.
everybody. So,
When you're in a position and you have a buyer who wants to purchase a property and the property is significantly overpriced, but obviously you want to represent your buyer well and have them purchase the property at the right price. What kind of strategies or dialogue?
Find out why they have it listed so high. Ask them straight up, what are you thinking? Where did you dream this number up? Help me understand. My buyer likes this property. I see it as this. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm missing something. Tell me what you thought. Help me understand. There's a piece of dirt sitting over by the Citadel Mall that's been sitting there for years. And I get somebody that actually kind of likes it. But it's just ridiculously overpriced. And I keep asking them and asking them and asking. They keep telling me, well, you could do this and do that. And yeah, with the variance and the zoning change and, you know, all these appeals, sure, you could make that into something different. But what you got is you can put this amount of building on it. That's it. And this amount of building extrapolates into this price. How are you getting it? When they stop replying to you, or when they say, you know, all right, we don't have an answer for that, seller just wants too much money, you just tell your buyer that.
And
You know?
that's a commercial kind of situation.
But that happens in everything.
But residential, a lot of times, do you find that there's more emotion attached
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a lot of what goes on? And how do you, in negotiating, if you get everybody to win, do you find that that makes deals happen? If you can find a way for both of them to win?
I think that yes, to your point, in residential real estate, it's more emotional driven because it just is people have, will, or at some point plan to lay their head there, and that's emotional for them. And the other areas of real estate are more just ego driven, and you know, there's less emotions, more business, but there's egos in it, so it's a whole different kind of emotion. But you don't necessarily ever make everybody happy. Liz and I have a friend of ours and a client of mine who was in yesterday, and she saw him, and he'll tell you that he's never happy when he goes to the closing table, whether he's a buyer or a seller.
But that's him.
But he feels like that somebody's worked because he knows the other side's not happy when he's not happy. You know, they're satisfied, but they're not necessarily everybody's happy. So, you know, you've kind of got to get to where sometimes it's your client that has to swallow a little bit of a pill they don't want to swallow, and sometimes it's the other party's client that has to swallow a pill that they don't really want to swallow. But it's the question of getting it done and finished, or do you want to go back to the marketplace and see if you can find something better, or see if you can find someone better? Because I think that the negotiation part of it is probably the funnest. It's the most interesting, it's the most frustrating, it's the most challenging, but it's also the most rewarding because you when you eventually get it put together and they get to the closing table or they get to signing the documents.
You go, yes.
Right. Right. But you usually, even though they're salty, they sign them and they get done. And they're all resigned to the fact that this is what it is.
See, yours isn't about winning, it's about resignation.
Well, no, I mean, it's one or the other. I mean, ideally, you want everybody, sometimes everybody's just really happy and they feel like everybody got what they wanted, but the emotions in the home selling business generally get in the way of that and bang things up along the way, and you have to prepare your people that this is going to be emotional. I mean, when you got a buyer and you're going to look at a house, I want to know the story behind the house before. If my buyer likes it, I want to know the story behind it. Why are they selling? What's their deal? Well, how long have they been? You can see how long they've been here. Why are they moving now? What's going on? So you can kind of find out maybe intuitively what emotions might come back at you or what different types of decisions might come back your way.
And
So
do
you can
you
think about
answer
it.
those questions?
No,
when
you
people
ask the
ask
other
you?
agent.
No, I'm saying if the other agent asks you those things.
Sure. I'll tell them what I can tell them. I'm not telling them anything that's confidential to my client.
Okay.
But things that are helpful and useful in getting things move on
And getting your price.
and getting to the number. Look, they're ready to sell the property. They don't have to sell the property. They're not in danger of losing the property. Bring me something reasonable and we can work with it. You know, I think all those, given the clear parameters from your client, are okay things to say to people. You know, unless you get lucky and you put something on the market, you got 3 buyers in the first day, which happens sometimes, you know, and then everybody wants to know, did you underprice it? No, you maybe got lucky, you know.
That's a good point, because that does come up in today's market.
Right, it happened to me earlier this year on Daniel Island. We put something out there and we had a tenant, we couldn't show it right away, but I put it in and said we'd start showings in a few days. We had to get it cleaned up and several people wanted to see it. And I was like, okay, so I got them all to come at once. And 2 of them wrote an offer, and one of them was reasonable, and the one that came second was cash and clean, and it happened tomorrow, but was significantly less. So it was helpful that way. And I didn't anticipate that kind of, I thought I'd have that for a couple months. I mean, I knew it would sell, but I thought I'd have it for a little bit.
To follow up with her question, I guess what I'm looking for is the do's and the don'ts when
Right.
agent to agent, we're negotiating agent to agent. I'm concerned about asking or saying something that I shouldn't be, legally, ethically.
Yeah, you can't divulge, if you know what your client's position is, you can't divulge that. But, I mean, as far as terms, anything but, other than price that you know that your client is willing to do and or needs to do, I think it's helpful to share that stuff. Look, my buyer has a VA loan and wants to use it, and they're gonna need 3% of closing costs, settlement costs, I call them, paid by the seller. And this house is 10 years old, so we're gonna want a home warranty. And, you know, since it's a VA loan, the VA is not gonna allow my buyer to do any repair items that are noted on the inspection or on the VA appraisal, because the VA appraisal may say there's a couple wet spots in the ceiling, have them evaluated. I think all that conversation up front is smart. I don't think you're harming your client's position. You're putting out there what you've got. If you don't have that conversation and you put it out there and it gets down the road and goes sideways, then what have you accomplished? You know, so absent getting into price and position and things like that. And then the other part of it is when you have a buyer, ask them what they, and there's things they like, you're gonna reach out to the other agent. Ask that buyer what is okay with them, for you to tell the other agent why they like that house and why they're interested and what you shouldn't say.
So if you get a verbal from your client, your buyer, even if they give you, instead they give you a verbal to, you know, lower the price $10,000, can you then say something if you get a verbal from them?
From your seller? From your
Buyer. You're representing a buyer, you put an offer in for $200,000. On the phone with the agent, they say no, 180. But your buyer has said, well, if they, you know, bring it down 10,000, you have the ability to do that for me. You negotiate.
Right, I like to have an email from
All right.
principals in the transaction, if that's what we're
Something.
gonna do.
Okay.
I like to have something in electronic communication. But if you have that in the back of your head, and the other agent is telling you what they're thinking, you can say, well, why don't you get your client to send you something in an email to that effect, okay? And I'll take it to my people. But what I can tell you is there's good faith on our part to get together here. Because you know that your folks have told you that you have the authority to move somewhere, but you're not really, you do no one any good by showing your number. I don't really think ethically you should give them your number. But if they've told you, let's get together on this, I mean, you know, you're having a conversation with somebody, you might as well say things that are relevant. Look, if your folks will move, I can get some movement. If you guys are on an iceberg, so am I. What are we doing? You know, I don't think any of that's wrong, right?
Correct.
So you can say that my buyer can move, but you just can't say a
You-
number.
Right, we're willing to work with you. Are you willing to work with us?
Okay.
You know, I love these buyers that bring me an offer, these agents that bring an offer, you know, and it's ring, and you answer the phone, and look, here's an offer coming in your email. I wanted to let you know that they really like this house, really love the property. It's great for all these reasons. However, just to save us all time, I want to let you know that here's the number, and they're really, really firm on it. So there's no need to counter us, just accept it or reject it, because we're going to move on. Because my buyer's a principled person from Texas or something like that. You know, you get these calls, right? I love this because, you know, if the number is close, and I've had it happen where the house is, you know, 800,000 and the number's 775,000, and I already know that my sellers want to sell it, and if the offer comes in and everything else is clean and we've had that conversation and you know the agent and you know they're not someone who, if you know them, you go to your seller and you talk to them, here's the conversation I had, here's the email, you want to read it? We haven't had anybody else, this is within your range, what do you want to do? Do you want to take it? Or do we want to try to split it with them? Do you want to counter a little bit with them? But these people that come at you with this stuff, it's really just kind of a silly strategy because it rarely really means that they've got something. They're just trying to see if you'll buckle.
It's really true.
You know, and
Almost never.
never. I mean, everything in the world is negotiable. And these people that they're what I say to them is I say, Ralph, I really appreciate the call. Thank you so much for the offer. I'm glad they love the property. Tell me again all the reasons they love it. So they really want this thing. Well, help me understand why presenting me a take it or leave it number is helping them get into that neighborhood and get that backyard and get that view from the master bedroom and get that kitchen that the wife loves so much. And you said she smiled the whole way through the house? Tell me how bringing me this take it or leave it is helping us accomplish that. If my seller really, really, really wants to sell, but you really, really want me to say, take it or leave it, help me out there. And then don't say another word. Just let the phone go silent for 10 minutes. That person eventually will puke all over you. You know?
Puco, that's a direct quote, right?
That's a technical term, yeah.
What about ghosts?
What about them?
What if they say they're selling it, do you have a buyer and you ask them why the list price is low and they say it's because of ghosts?
Who says that? The selling agent?
Seller.
The seller says it's because of ghosts?
They're moving because of ghosts.
I tend to believe the ghosts will probably travel with the crazy people.
That's a good
I don't know that for a fact.
No, you couldn't know it for a fact.
Right.
Let me ask you this, because I know this happens a lot, but a lot of the real estate agents, they have multiple offers on the property. They're a listing agent.
Or they
have-
fish one.
They've got multiple offers. And that another one's coming in and they say, the other agent wants to bring another contract and says, can you tell me what you got on the property? Yeah, one of them's for 50,000, one's for 55,000. Address that.
All right. Well, then, now you're getting into a bunch of stuff that'll get me on a soapbox for 3 days. But when you have a buyer that wants to put an offer in good faith on a piece of property that you've been to and you followed up with the seller or the seller's agent and you said, hey, do you have anybody knocking on your door, beating down your path, anybody that's shown a lot of interest? Tell me, because my buyer likes it. I don't know what we're going to do yet, but do you have anybody breathing down your neck right now? No, I mean, no, everything, no, nothing, no. Okay, let me call you call them back. I'm sitting here right now at a computer. I'm writing you an offer. You're going to have it in 15 minutes. It's going to be a clean offer. Okay, I want you to know that you're going to have it. All right? What kind of reply time do you need? Because I don't want to put your seller under duress, because you hate the offer that comes in at 2:30 on a Tuesday and they've got a 5 p.m. termination date the same day. You know, and the agent's calling you at 2:45. Have you replied yet? Have you replied yet? Replied yet? You know, so you submit that offer, and shockingly enough, you've given them time, because the selling agent told you need a little bit of time to track down the daughter and the mother and the father and whoever. And you don't hear, and the next morning, surprise, surprise, they've got another offer. So, what do? My gut instinct in my advice to my client is, let's pull ours, tell them good luck. I ask you, if you had an offer, you told me you didn't. I told you I was bringing you an offer. I asked you politely how much time you'd like, and I asked you to deal with me in good faith, and I would do the same with you. Now you've shot me all night, got another offer, good for you. See if it's as clean as this one. See it. That's what I want to do.
Wow.
But again, you do what your client wants to do. And if they want to stay engaged, then you stay engaged with it. But I don't like that. If you've done your good work up front and they don't have something, and miraculously the next day they do, they've spent all night pinging you. Now those agents that answer their phone and go, the listing agent just called me and has an offer and wants me to get in a bidding war. Let me do that. Let me call up my, I don't have those buyers that do that. That say, yeah, sign me up to put me in multiple offers, a buyer situation. But apparently there's smarter and sharper agents out there that can get their buyers off the fence just to get in a bidding war. But what I like to do is take that away right up front, if possible.
But I'm also addressing the fact that I know agents are not supposed to ever divulge what the other offers are.
No.
But people do it. But I'm saying you should never do that.
No, you do not. I have an offer. It's been, and again, when you get your offer, get it to your seller. When you get the offer and it check marks those boxes that you've told your seller it will have, you know, the pre-approval or qualification. Now, if there's something weird with the pre-qualification, like it's some crazy internet bank to be unnamed quicken, did I say that? Then you might tell your seller, look, we've got this, but this gives me heartburn because I know it could be a roller coaster of craziness. But, you know, check marks these, get the offer to your seller and let them decide. Don't hold it.
Waiting for another one,
Yeah, you can get in touch with your client. You can do it. Okay, get it to them. And if another one comes in before they've replied, then you can legitimately say to that, hey, I got it to them, but another offer came in before they replied. You're always on higher ground then.
And then, do you say to the second or third or fourth one, we have multiple offers, come in with your best?
You can, it's up to
If
your
you
seller.
want, is
It's
that
up-
what you're saying?
It's up to your seller. I mean, if the
Our
first offer
seller
came in
says-
and it's pretty clean and the seller, it's their decision. If another offer legitimately comes in, now if you've got a seller saying, look, call everybody in the planet and get me another one, then you gotta do it. Everybody shown the property, you gotta do it. All right? And don't say anything to that buyer's agent, but what you do is the seller's agent is you get that offer to your seller. I think that's what we're supposed to do, right?
Absolutely.
And there's
That's
X
the law.
amount of time to reply, and that seller can reply, but we gotta do our job and get it to them. Because when you're on the other side of the fence, you want that other agent taking your offer and getting it to your seller. And if the seller chooses to hold up or instruct their agent to do, then we have to obey their lawful requests. I love reading that one to them, you know? I don't have to obey your lawful requests.
I have a question, Tim.
Sure.
If you've negotiated a contract and it's gone and it's been ratified, and in the middle of it, they terminate the contract. It's now terminated, everything's done, they're no longer working with this house. An agent comes in and says, hey, I'm showing the house, you just showed, you know, you had that contract on. What was your offer? What did they accept?
I don't tell them.
That's what okay.
You can't tell them.
Well, I don't think I'm allowed to divulge that.
Yeah, you can't, you can't tell them that. You know, now, the listing agent with the seller's permission, if that other agent wanted to ask them that, could ask him, but you know, you can't tell them anything if you were the buyer's agent. The listing agent, correct me if I'm wrong, but
That's
the
right.
seller said, gives them permission, hey, anybody that calls you, tell us what we had before, and we'd be willing to look at that again. They can do, the listing agent can, but use the buyer's agent, you're harming your buyer if you talk about what they did or didn't do.
I got another one for you. You ever,
No.
no, I don't think so. I think the answer's no, but, do you ever negotiate through email? When
Yeah.
you say negotiate through email,
Yeah.
like you send like a somewhat long response with the intent that email will be forwarded from the agent to their client?
Yeah, I usually put in the front, please forward this to your client. Tell me, confirm when you have done so. That's the first sentence. And then you keep it to bullet points. People are riddled with ADD in this world. Here's the points, as I understand it, we agree on. Here's where we disagree. Keep it as simple and concise and to the facts.
But keeping in mind, that's not legal.
It's not a contract, but here's where we're at. Please, let me know if we're right, and then let's get a contract marked up and get it done. You know, but sure, there's some people that I deal with, clients of mine, that are impossible to get on the phone. They just are. They'll email me and text message me, and you know, and then I'm screenshotting text messages so I have phone numbers and or names of people, or I forward in myself email so I've got a paper trail, so that when we go back and put the contract together, and they've got selective memory, or they don't remember because honestly they're doing a gazillion things throughout the day. You can go back and show them where, hey, this is what, and then almost always they're like, oh yeah, that's right, you're right, good job, go do that, I'll sign it, you know.
And one thing along those lines, most of you in here, I think, have this at the bottom of your signature on your emails. They have that paragraph that Byron King from Columbia recommended we use that says it's not legally binding,
What's that?
the emails.
Oh, that's right,
That
yeah,
paragraph
yeah,
at the bottom, that you
right,
should put, if you don't have it, you should have it on your emails.
right.
I mean, what the, I was gonna say on your iPhone and your iPad, don't forget that doesn't have that.
You can set that up so it goes
Right.
on there.
You just have to remember to put that as your
Right.
signature on it also,
Right.
Where,
in
where,
addition to your Gmail.
where do you get that from?
You can look at the bottom of my email
Oh, just left it off.
Copy.
and copy and paste. It's
But I think
put it
that
on there.
it's really, that when you're talking, and I get what some of you are asking me about, is you don't want to divulge things and you don't want to be unethical, and nobody does. But any conversation you're having with another agent and/or seller or a buyer on behalf of your client, okay, and make sure they're your client.
Really.
Okay, somebody that calls you on the phone that you put in your car, you drive to show a piece of property, ain't your client, that's a customer, and you're a sub-agent of the listing agent. So that's why it's important to have your agency disclosure in your buyer agency form, so you can get them to hire you and you know they're working with you, then they're real. Then you can make sure they're pre-qualified, right? Because that's, you want to make sure they're hiring you, and you want to let them know that you can go look at houses till the cows come home, but until you know what comfort level they have for purchasing, which only comes through a really good pre-qualification or pre-approval letter. And Dan and his people only write pre-approval letters, so that's better than a pre-qual. But you get those things up front, then you're developing a relationship with that buyer. But any communication you have with the agents or sellers for that, you're negotiating. I don't care what you're saying. You're talking to them on the phone. You're not talking to them about what kind of shoes they're wearing. You're talking to them about the property they have and what they're doing and what they feedback they're hearing, and you're going to hear some stuff, and you're going to ask them all kinds of things. Does anybody ask you about the casing around the chimney? No, why'd you ask? I don't know. I just thought it looked funny.
Yeah, if you get to that point in the conversation, unless there's something really weird going on, you're almost at the point where they're gonna get the house. I mean, in one
Right.
way or another.
Right, but just
I mean,
remember.
it's just, you gotta negotiate through it, but
Right.
if you've gotten there, then,
Right. I think that all the conversation we have in the course of the day is at some level of negotiation. It really is. Getting off the phone with your clients. It's negotiation.
So if you're speaking to your client about,
And I mean that in love. I do.
you're speaking to your client about having a price reduction,
Yeah.
and you know it has to be reduced.
Yes.
Okay, and they are just adamant, and you've had 10 showings in 4 weeks.
Yes.
And every agent has said, price is too high, price is too high, price is too high. Where do you go? They can fire us as an agent, that's our agent-owned thing.
We can find with them too.
And yet,
oh gosh,
But as
Well, I
we're
mean-
listing, we don't file.
because you know what, it makes you look like an idiot as you're sitting here on the internet with this price, that house that's overpriced.
I got a buddy of mine that works on the beach, who sold more real estate than anybody out there. He's been around a long time. And he said to me one time, he said, Tim, he said, I don't really care. He said, the only thing that ever sells a piece of property is the price. Know what you want. Okay? So, when you've got that for consistent and persistent feedback, and I'm sure you've done your comps on the area, okay, and maybe you have an area that's all over the map, because maybe you're down in a transitional area, and maybe you've got a property that's multi-family, and you got good tenants, and they think they got a great price because they've got good income. Well, no. But you're not getting anything. My point is, I want a seller to tell me one or two things up front. Do you want to sell the house, or you just want to put it on the market? Do you want to sell the property, or you just want to put it on the market? I need to know, because that's going to impact how I'm going to hit my wallet to market for you. If we get consistent feedback, first of all, if we put it on the market and we get crickets, there's a good chance we're overpriced. If we get a bunch of showings that everybody's saying it's overpriced and no one's bringing us an offer, there's a good chance we're overpriced. Now, you know, if you just want to put it out there and see if some blind squirrel comes along and wants to buy it, great. I'm in for it. But don't be pinging me about why it isn't selling, right? But at the same time, we have to be willing to drop the price at reasonable intervals to find the market. If I've done what I said I'll do, which is get great pictures and get it marketed properly and have it visible to the marketplace and have it accessible to who's looking at that type of property the easiest way possible, and you're demonstrating that to them, then you've committed some significant dollars in time, which are dollars. They are less resistant when you have that conversation up front. I like to say, I like to get them all mad at me up front, and that way when they hire me, we have a smoother sailing going down the road.
Well, that's what I explained to him. You know, when I went out to see this house, the house is a disaster. The house needs to be torn down. And Liz and I have spoken about this. I said, you know, you have price and you have condition. What's gonna sell? The condition of this house is not gonna sell. All you're basically selling is the dirt. But they think, well, if a builder's gonna come in here and subdivide this and make all this money, I said, yes, but the builder's gonna do all the work unless you wanna do the work. I mean, you're trying to figure how to, you know, get them to understand
Yeah.
that side of the coin.
Well, one problem you're dealing with there too is that it's an estate. It's a brother and two sisters or something, there's 3 children. Heirs.
Everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah.
6 of them.
You try to, in that case, if possible, you want to identify who all's got, who has to sign off to get it done. But you want to identify, get the family to agree on 2 or 3 people you can interface with and have that communication. And again, especially when it's family, not necessarily heirs property, but inherited property where I've got a piece in North Charleston, there's 7 family members and a total of 30 people in the family. And I don't know what to do with it yet, but the point being is, eventually we're gonna get to a point where I'm gonna have communication that goes out to all of them, that we're gonna have a few people that are gonna be here's what I think you can do, and here's where we should start, okay? And this is, and we're gonna get a game plan teed up front. They can have somebody else do it. So, right. But don't be afraid to just let it go. If it's not gonna work and they're not listening to the logic and you've really done your work, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have to let somebody go, and they're gonna have to let you go at times.
I'm doing a builder's open house, if anybody wants to come out to John's Island. Hard hats and screwdrivers are being given.
Sweet, that's a great idea.
There's sub
That's a
sandwiches
great
or,
idea.
you know.
Oh, so you mentioned to keep asking them, how do you think it'll appraise? Is there a chance that they might not get insurance for the
Sure.
period?
Sure, that's another thing, you know, especially, it's not as bad this year as last year, because FEMA has somewhat backed down from the cliff, but I still approach everything as if it's October 2013, you know, on flood insurance. We need to get an actuarial rate on flood insurance. And I love it when I get 3 different insurance agents saying, well, you can't even get that, here's what they're doing now, and that way you've done your job, because they can change their mind in 3 months. Because none of them know what the plan's gonna be in 3 months. But if the house is low, it's low. You know, now they've brought back grandfathering. But roofs, you can look at a house, you should be able to look at a house and tell you that the roof doesn't owe anybody anything. And the listing agent shouldn't be able to argue with you about that. And the seller in his mind can't argue with you about that. That house is not gonna get insured for a bank loan unless there's a new roof on there. You might get short-term insurance, but more than likely, the roof's gonna have to go on before the closing. And you've gotta have that conversation early and often to get everybody's head wrapped around it. Look, you wanna sell the property, need a new roof, okay?
What happens too, if they get the insurance, and then the insurance person goes out and checks it after closing,
Right.
insurance is gonna be canceled.
Right.
It's happened several times lately.
Or
Right. so you-
damages happen because of the roof and they didn't know it,
Right.
and they're not gonna pay for it, they can get big now.
Right, so there's all kinds of things going on with insurance out there, but we have due diligence. We don't do this silly repair procedure, right? So in your due diligence, you're getting the insurance quotes and you're getting this stuff and you're checking with people and verifying it. But you want the seller's insurance and you want the seller's flood insurance, and if you can transfer it, great. But our eyes are supposed to be looking at things, you know, to help our buyers figure stuff out. And we want to ask, I'll call 3 or 4 insurance agents and show them what I got. I'll take pictures with my phone. Say, what are you doing with this? Here's what I can find out. What can we get? Because I want to get all that to the buyer.
You always talk to Alex and Terry.
I do. I talked to Alex and
Terry.
Terry, sure.
We'll see a handful of contracts that'll come in where they will try to negotiate things like that into the contract, which is not allowed. Seller will give $5,000 credit to buyer for a new roof. You can't add things in. They're called seller inducements. So,
but they can do it up front?
the seller can fix it up front.
Someone
Right.
can fix it
Do it
before
all.
closing,
They
yeah.
can handle all that up front. That's no big deal. They can handle it through the process. They can't give cash.
Oh, right,
There's
right,
an
right,
extra
right.
incentive, but we see contracts come in where we'll say,
Now, we used to be
we'll
able
give
to-
you $1,000 to repair the wood
Used to
rot that
be
we see along the way.
Well, you can't get it insured with the roof at a certain point. That's why I just tell people with a straight face, I said, call your insurance agent, call any insurance agent, take a picture of that roof and ask them if that's gonna get covered for the wind rating in our geographic location. The answer's gonna be no. You save yourself time, but here's a list of insurance agents, call them. So, and you're right, you can't give that money to the buyer. You used to be able to where you could get X amount of dollars cut to Steve's contracting service, but what I think we do now is we try to find a reputable contractor that will come in and put the roof on 3 days before closing.
Yeah, in that particular example, it would have to be fixed. Our roof would have to be fixed prior to
Right, because you
closing.
gotta get the insurance to bind,
Correct.
and you gotta have a lot of good faith with people and a lot of stuff signed off on, but the contractor comes in, puts the roof on literally 2 days before closing. The insurance agent comes out, verifies it's on there. The boxes get check marked. The deal gets closed, and that contractor gets paid off the HUD from the seller's proceeds. Now, whether the contract got adjusted, sale price up or down along the way, when we realized that was the problem, the price goes up, the price goes down.
Would be hard to do it,
It's hard to change the price at that late.
correct.
But you do that early, you go to contract,
Correct.
inspections, if the agent doesn't see it, the inspector says, hey, this roof's shot.
Yeah.
You guys probably haven't even done the appraisal yet.
Correct.
You get a quote for your inspections, you modify the contract to raise the price $7,000, and then it,
You want to do all that before the financing starts.
right, you do it before the appraisal. That's why, again, you get it, when you get it under contract, you're committing to get it inspected in some manner. Try to make sure the lender doesn't tee up the appraisal until you know what you got from an inspection standpoint. And, because you may have something to walk away from. One of our new agents had one the other day, and she had, the home inspector that I used was at the house, and she said, come here, because he called me, there was just all kinds of stuff wrong with it, and I think they've let the house go.
She had due diligence, thank goodness.
Right.
It was a
Right.
mess, yeah.
Right. But,
Tim's good.
yeah.
This particular house just had water everywhere, water. So, it was over toward Folly Beach.
So, yeah, but if you need repairs that are in excess of what can be done until closing, you want to find that out early and then figure out with your lender how you can have that structured to where everybody's on the same page, right?
Yeah.
And earlier the better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I put you
And-
couldn't put them into the mortgage.
The earlier you do it, you're now financing a house with a new roof on it.
So this is the balance.
Yeah, but you're gonna have to, as Tim said, you're gonna have to identify that for you turn in a ratified contract and we start our process.
That's right.
You can't
that's
change
right.
it in there, otherwise you're, it all falls to the selling inducements.
Right.
And not everything has to be fixed to meet lender standards, but you've got your ethical standards, you've got to meet representing the buyer.
But what I'm saying is, there's cases where you're not gonna get it insured,
Right.
which therefore it's not gonna meet the lender standards
Right.
until there's a new roof on there.
Right.
So, and there's no money in the bank to do it until we get to closing, so you have to figure out how to get everybody happy to get that roof on there, and the earlier you get with everybody involved, hey, this is our problem, how do we solve it?
And it really
Yeah.
should be done, as you said, before appraisals are done, before this body spends a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, when you walk up to the house, you can tell if a roof is shot, pretty much. If it's really bad, we're not contractors, but you can tell if it's really bad, and that's one of your questions to the other agent. Hey, what's your plan with the roof? If the agent says, what do you mean? Or if the seller's got no representation on the roof, and they've been there for 15 years, and you're looking at it, it's missing shingles everywhere, and you see, roof sheathing.
Oh, wait, are you just asking the buyer to pay more in good faith, thinking that 2 days before the closing, the seller.
You gotta put it all into,
That's
Well,
what
you know,
they think that-
it's all
they wanna see it
situational.
written.
sure, you gotta have a,
But I thought you
Is
could
it in
write
the-
it in the
Yeah.
contract.
you can't do it, you can't have your financing 3/4 of the way across the river, and then you're adding a roof to the
I'm
deal.
saying, so you're gonna write up an offer,
Yeah.
and supposedly they're gonna put a new roof right before the closing.
You put in the
So the buyer
contract,
is paying more money.
you put in the contract the seller to replace the roof.
That's
Oh,
right.
Part of
I thought
closing.
you couldn't have it in the contract.
Well, you can have that, the sellers to replacing it before closing, you
You
can put
can't
that in
give the
there.
buyer money at closing.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
the
so you
difference
could
in-
write it in that it will be,
What you can't do is, we've negotiated $200,000 sale price, we've started the mortgage, and then you come back and say, it's 210 now, and they have to fix the roof. Then you throw everything sideways at that,
Right.
and you're crossing your fingers, it appraises for 210. So you negotiate it all out front, you say sale price 210, roof needs to be replaced, and whatever other.
is it actually in the due diligence though that you would write that you wanted that?
Sure, you're gonna find out, and when you get your inspection, for sure, that's a problem, and it's probably beyond its useful life.
You put it in a repair addendum.
Right.
I mean, I had one in Snee Farm, it was my cellar in, I don't know, the roof that was there was gonna need $3,000 in repairs for drip edge and this thing and that thing and other things. Or it was like $4,200 for a whole new roof with all new flashing. I mean, it's really a no-brainer at that point. It's like when the compressor goes out in an air conditioner. You know, it's $1,800 for the compressor, $2,400 for the whole new little thing to sit outside the condo. You know, you just gotta, when you find those things, you just gotta deal with it, and the earlier you get to it, and get to all the people, because you know it's not gonna fly if it's broken, right? And the seller doesn't want it back, so you gotta figure out how to do it.
Stephanie, did you have a question a while ago? Thought you started to say something. No? Just trying to see if anybody else had any questions or points.
I have something I'd like to share, I think
It's-
you might have missed it the last time. The Stark exterminators up in Somerville, they'll come down and do a pre-CL 100 for free. And it's a good thing for like a listing, you know, if you're doing a listing, or right now I have a VA that's not gonna close, I don't think. So I just wanna jump on it to see if there's a problem. So they're gonna come down and do a pre-CL 100 for free. And warn me if I've got a problem.
There's some companies that'll do that.
Anybody else have anything? Nope. Well, Tim, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.